Deep in the quiet darkness of space, far from busy trade routes and crowded star systems, a small alien research station floated alone. The station was called Relay Outpost 7. It was not an important place. Most of the galaxy had never even heard its name. The station's only job was simple: listen. It listened to signals. Old signals. New signals. Strange signals. Most days were boring. But tonight, something was different. Inside the main control room, a young communications officer named Tarek watched the screens carefully. His shift had already lasted 6 long hours. Nothing unusual had happened. Just static. Just silence. Just the endless whisper of space. Tarek leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Another quiet night," he said. Across the room, the station's senior scientist, Professor Malin, adjusted a scanner and replied calmly. "Space is always quiet, until it is not." Tarek smiled a little. The old professor loved saying strange things like that. Then suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the room. Beep. Tarek quickly sat up. Another sound followed. Beep. Beep. A signal alert flashed on the main screen. Tarek frowned. "That's strange," he muttered. Professor Malin walked over slowly. "What is it?" Tarek pointed at the display. "We are receiving a transmission." The professor looked surprised. "From where?" Tarek checked the coordinates. His eyes widened. "That can't be right." "Explain," Malin said. Tarek swallowed. "The signal is coming from deep space, far beyond any known system." The professor studied the data. "No ships are supposed to be out there." "I know." Tarek opened the signal log and began analyzing it. The transmission was weak. Old. Very old. "How old?" the professor asked. Tarek ran a time scan. Then he froze. His voice became quiet. "Millions of years." The room suddenly felt colder. Professor Malin looked confused. "That is impossible. No technology lasts that long." But the signal was real. And it was repeating. Over and over. Tarek isolated the message and converted it into readable language. For a moment the screen stayed blank. Then one simple sentence appeared. Both aliens stared at it. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally Tarek whispered, "That makes no sense." The message on the screen said only 7 words. "Do not send this signal to Earth." The room fell silent. Professor Malin blinked slowly. "Earth," he said. Tarek nodded. "The human homeworld." The professor frowned deeply. "Why would a signal millions of years old mention humans?" Tarek shook his head. "Humans only joined the galactic community a few centuries ago." "Exactly." They both looked back at the screen. The message repeated again. "Do not send this signal to Earth." Tarek crossed his arms. "This is probably some kind of joke or corrupted data." Professor Malin was not so sure. "Run a deeper analysis." Tarek followed the order. He scanned the signal structure, frequency layers, and encryption patterns. The more he studied it, the more confused he became. "This technology," he said slowly. "Yes. It doesn't match any known civilization." Professor Malin's eyes narrowed. "Not even ancient ones?" "No." The signal looked advanced. Too advanced. And yet it was unbelievably old. The professor leaned closer to the screen. "Perhaps it is a warning." Tarek laughed nervously. "A warning? For humans?" "Yes. But why?" Neither of them had an answer. For several minutes they simply watched the signal repeat. Again and again. "Do not send this signal to Earth." Finally Tarek sighed. "Well, that seems simple." Professor Malin raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Tarek shrugged. "If the message says not to send it, then we simply ignore it." "That would be the logical choice." "Yes. But curiosity is a powerful thing." Tarek stared at the screen. The message kept repeating. Why would anyone send such a warning? Why specifically Earth? What was so dangerous about it? The young officer leaned forward. "I wonder what happens if we do send it." Professor Malin turned quickly. "That would be foolish." "Maybe. But also interesting." The professor's voice became firm. "Tarek, the message clearly says not to do it." "Yes, but think about it." Tarek pointed at the signal. "If someone created this warning millions of years ago, they must have known something." "Exactly. Which means there must be a reason." The professor crossed his arms. "And your plan is to ignore the warning completely?" Tarek smiled slightly. "Well, humans are known for being curious." Professor Malin stared at him. "You are not human." "I know. But now I really want to know what they would do." The professor sighed. "This station is not authorized to contact Earth with unknown signals." Tarek looked at the communication console. Sending the message would be easy. Just one command. One simple transmission. The warning continued to flash on the screen. Do not send this signal to Earth. Tarek tapped his fingers on the desk. Then he spoke quietly. Maybe whoever wrote this message wanted someone to break the rule. Professor Malin shook his head. That is dangerous thinking. Maybe. But imagine if this signal is important. The professor hesitated. Tarek noticed. You're curious too, he said. I am cautious. Sure. Another long silence filled the room. Finally, the professor said, if we send the signal, we must report it to the Galactic Council. Of course. And if something goes wrong, this station will be responsible. Tarek nodded slowly. I understand. The young officer looked at the screen again. The message repeated once more. Do not send this signal to Earth. He took a deep breath. Then he typed a command. Preparing transmission, he said. Professor Malin closed his eyes for a moment. Very well. Tarek selected the destination. Earth Communication Network. He copied the ancient signal. One last warning message appeared. Unknown transmission detected. Confirm forwarding? Tarek smiled nervously. Here we go. He pressed the final key. The transmission left the station instantly. A thin beam of data shot across space toward human territory. For a moment nothing happened. Tarek leaned back in his chair. Well, that was easy. Professor Malin looked uneasy. Perhaps too easy. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, the station alarms exploded. Warning! Warning! Every screen turned red. Tarek jumped up. What is happening? The professor rushed to another console. I am detecting massive activity in human space. How massive? The professor's voice shook. Hundreds, no, thousands of signals. Tarek stared at the display. Across the star map, human systems were lighting up. One after another. Military bases. Defense satellites. Fleet command centers. All activating at the same time. Tarek whispered, that's not normal. Then a powerful broadcast message appeared on every channel. The message came from humanity. The voice was calm, cold, completely emotionless. Threat signal confirmed. Tarek felt his stomach drop. The message continued. Initiating protocol, last horizon. The star map changed again. Hidden shipyards opened. Massive warships began leaving their docks. Entire fleets moved into formation. Professor Malin stared in shock. This is a full military mobilization. How big? Bigger than anything I have ever seen. Tarek's voice became small. All because of that signal? The professor slowly nodded. I believe so. Another human message appeared. All fleets prepare for deployment. The galaxy had never seen humans react this fast. Never this aggressively. Within minutes, thousands of ships were moving toward deep space. Tarek whispered, what have we done? Professor Malin did not answer. On the main screen, a final human message appeared. It was not meant for the station. It was meant for the entire galaxy. Unknown civilizations are advised to evacuate nearby systems. The enemy may already be here. Tarek's heart began to race. Enemy? Professor Malin looked terrified. If humans reacted like this. He paused. Then whatever that signal means. He turned toward the star map filled with human warships. It must be something they fear. Outside the station windows, the silent stars watched. And far away in the darkness, humanity's deadliest fleets were already moving. The war had just begun. Rocket the Galaxy had never seen humans move this fast. Across hundreds of star systems, massive human warships were leaving their stations. Shipyards that had been silent for years suddenly came alive. Huge metal doors opened, and fleets began to move into deep space. Every military satellite turned on. Every defense network activated. Every human colony received the same message. Emergency protocol active. All civilian ships returned to safe systems. On Relay Outpost 7, Tarek and Professor Malin watched the star map in silence. The screen showed hundreds of blinking signals. Every signal was a human warship. Tarek slowly shook his head. This is impossible. Professor Malin spoke quietly. No civilization prepares for war this quickly, unless they have done it before. Tarek turned toward him. You think humans expected this? The professor did not answer immediately. Instead, he opened another channel and began searching through historical records. If this signal scared them, he said slowly, then it must be connected to something very old. Meanwhile, the signal they had sent continued repeating across space. The same 7 words. Do not send this signal to Earth. But it was too late now. Earth had already received it, and humanity had already responded. Far away, inside the Galactic Council headquarters, panic was spreading. Alien leaders from dozens of civilizations had gathered in the main chamber. Large holographic screens showed the growing human fleet. Thousands of warships, destroyers, carriers, massive battleships, even strange black ships that no one had ever seen before. One council member stood up suddenly. Why are humans mobilizing their entire military? Another replied nervously. No official war has been declared. A third alien officer spoke. We tried contacting Earth. What did they say? The officer hesitated. Only one sentence. The room became silent. What sentence? Someone asked. The officer looked at the screen again. His voice sounded uneasy. Evacuate your systems. The council chamber exploded with worried voices. Evacuate? From what? What threat could force humans to warn the entire galaxy? No one knew. But the answer was coming. Back on Relay Outpost 7, Professor Malin finally found something. A very old record. Older than most civilizations in the galaxy. He opened the file slowly. Tarek, he said quietly. You should see this. The young officer walked over. What is it? The professor pointed at the screen. Ancient war history. Tarek frowned. I thought humans only joined the galactic community recently. They did. But this record is not from the council archives. Then where? The professor zoomed in. Human archives. Tarek blinked. You accessed human military history? Yes. And you found something? Professor Malin nodded slowly. There was a war thousands of years ago. Tarek looked confused. But humans were barely exploring space back then. That is what everyone believed. The professor tapped the screen again. New information appeared. Old battle reports. Destroyed star systems. Strange unknown ships. And one terrifying name repeated again and again. The Void Hunters. Tarek read the name carefully. Who were they? The professor's voice became quiet. No one knows exactly. But according to these records. He paused. They were not a normal species. Tarek leaned closer. What does that mean? The professor opened another report. Images appeared on the screen. Strange black ships. Sharp shapes. Organic structures mixed with metal. These ships were alive, Malin said. Part machine. Part biological. Tarek stared at the images. That's impossible. And yet these records show entire star systems destroyed by them. Destroyed how? The professor opened the next file. Planets burning. Cities erased. Stars surrounded by black fleets. They did not conquer planets, Malin said slowly. They erased life. Tarek felt cold. Completely? Yes. No survivors? None. The young officer looked at the screen again. How many systems were lost? The professor hesitated. Then he answered. Thousands. Tarek stepped back. That's genocide on a galactic scale. Yes. And the strange part is. Malin pointed at another line in the records. The war suddenly ended. How? Humans. Tarek laughed in disbelief. Humans stopped them? That is what the records say. But how could they fight something like that? The professor zoomed in on another document. The title was clear. Operation Silent Horizon. Tarek read the details quickly. Human fleets. Experimental weapons. Massive battles. Entire armadas destroyed. But in the end, the Void Hunters vanished. No ships. No signals. Nothing. The war simply ended. Tarek slowly sat down. So humans fought this nightmare species and won? Apparently. But why has no one heard about this? Professor Malin gave a simple answer. Because humans never told anyone. At that moment, a new message appeared on the station screen. A direct transmission from Earth Military Command. Both aliens froze. The message opened automatically. A calm human voice spoke. This is Earth Defense Command. All non-human vessels are advised to leave outer systems immediately. Tarek whispered. They sound very serious. The message continued. The signal you transmitted has activated an ancient threat protocol. Professor Malin leaned closer. What threat? The voice answered as if it could hear him. A species known as the Void Hunters. Tarek and Malin looked at each other. The voice continued. They were believed extinct. The signal you forwarded is their identification code. Tarek's heart began beating faster. So that message, Professor Malin finished the sentence, was a warning. The human transmission continued. If this signal exists again. A short pause followed. Then the voice finished the sentence. Then they are still alive. Across human space, fleets were gathering. Thousands of ships moved like a giant storm through the stars. Inside one of the largest battleships, a human admiral watched the same signal repeating. The words flashed on the screen. Do not send this signal to Earth. The admiral crossed his arms. Too late for that. Another officer asked quietly. Sir, do you really think it's them? The admiral looked at the signal again. His expression became serious. This code belongs to only one species. The Void Hunters. And if their signal is active again. He turned toward the giant window showing the growing fleet outside. Then this war never truly ended. Outside, thousands of human warships were forming battle groups. Massive carriers. Heavy destroyers. Planet defense cruisers. Even darker ships with experimental weapons. The officer swallowed. Sir, this is the largest fleet humanity has ever assembled. The admiral nodded slowly. That's because this enemy is the worst one we have ever faced. The officer asked one last question. Do you think the galaxy understands what is coming? The admiral looked back at the repeating signal. Then he said quietly, No, they have no idea. Back on Relay Outpost 7, Tarek stared at the star map. Human fleets were now moving beyond their borders. Into deep space. Toward the dark region where the ancient signal had come from. Tarek whispered, So the enemy humans fear. Professor Malin finished the sentence. Might be out there again. The young officer watched the endless stream of warships leaving human territory. For the first time, he realized something terrifying. Humans were not preparing for war. They were preparing for hunting. And somewhere in the darkness of space, something had just woken up. The human fleets moved through space like a silent storm. Thousands of warships traveled together in perfect formation. From far away, they looked like a field of shining stars moving across the darkness. But every ship was a weapon. Every ship was built for war. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations watched the same terrifying sight. Their sensors followed the fleets as they left human space and moved toward the deep, empty region where the ancient signal had come from. No one had ever seen humanity mobilize like this. Not even during their largest known conflicts. Inside the Galactic Council headquarters, the leaders of many species stared at the holographic map in disbelief. A council officer spoke nervously. Human fleet count has passed 3,000 ships. Another officer added, More fleets are still launching from hidden shipyards. One alien leader asked the question everyone feared. How many ships do humans actually have? The officer hesitated. Then he answered, We do not know. Silence filled the chamber. For the first time, the galaxy realized something shocking. No one truly knew how strong humanity really was. Meanwhile, deep inside one of the largest human warships, the battle carrier Titan's Reach, Admiral Marcus Hale studied the tactical displays. Outside the giant observation window, hundreds of warships surrounded the carrier like an armored shield. Destroyers, heavy cruisers, strike carriers, missile platforms. Each ship moved with precise discipline. A young human officer stood beside the admiral. Fleet groups Alpha, Beta, and Gamma are in position, sir. Admiral Hale nodded. Good. Another officer spoke from a nearby console. Long-range sensors are still tracking the signal source. Hale asked calmly. Distance. 3 light days ahead. The admiral crossed his arms. Then we will reach the location soon. The officer hesitated before asking the question on everyone's mind. Sir, do you really think the Void Hunters are still alive? Hale looked at the ancient signal repeating on the screen. The same warning. Do not send this signal to Earth. His voice was calm. I hope they are not. The officer frowned. And if they are? The admiral answered quietly. Then this fleet will remind them why they disappeared the first time. Far away, Relay Outpost 7 was still watching everything. Tarek could hardly believe what he was seeing. The human fleets continued growing larger every hour. He turned toward Professor Malin. I think we made a terrible mistake. The professor nodded slowly. Yes, but now the entire galaxy will learn the truth. Tarek looked back at the tactical map. About what? Malin answered with one sentence. About the enemy humans once defeated. 3 days later, the human fleet finally reached the edge of the dark region where the ancient signal had originated. This part of space was empty. No planets. No stars. Just endless darkness. But the signal was still repeating. Admiral Hale watched the sensor data carefully. Scanning area. The fleet's advanced detection systems began searching every direction. Massive sensor arrays spread across thousands of ships. Every particle, every radiation wave, every movement in space. For several minutes nothing appeared. Then suddenly, a sensor officer spoke quickly. "Sir, we found something." Admiral Hale looked up. "Location." The officer pointed at the screen. 2 million kilometers ahead. The admiral leaned forward. "What is it?" The officer zoomed in. A strange shape appeared in the darkness. At first it looked like debris. Then the image became clearer. It was a ship, but not a normal one. The surface looked alive. Organic patterns spread across the hull like veins. Metal and biological material were fused together. The ship was enormous, at least 5 times larger than a human battleship. The bridge became quiet. One officer whispered, "That's not possible." Admiral Hale did not look surprised. He simply nodded. "Void Hunter scout ship." The young officer beside him asked quietly, "Just one?" The sensor officer answered, "Negative." The display zoomed out again. More shapes appeared. Then more. Then dozens. Dark ships slowly moving through the void. Their surfaces twisting and shifting like living creatures. The fleet officer's voice shook. "Sir, we are detecting a full enemy formation." Admiral Hale took a slow breath. "So they survived?" Another officer asked. "How many ships?" The sensor data updated. Enemy count approximately 200. The bridge crew looked at each other. 200 enemy ships. But they had destroyed entire civilizations before. Admiral Hale spoke calmly. "Battle stations." Across thousands of human ships, alarms began sounding. Crew members moved quickly to their positions. Weapon systems activated. Energy shields expanded. Fighter squadrons prepared for launch. The massive human fleet formed a defensive wall in space. Meanwhile, the alien ships ahead began moving. Their dark shapes twisted and opened like giant metal flowers. Strange glowing energy gathered around them. One officer shouted, "Enemy weapons charging." Admiral Hale nodded. "They recognized us." The young officer asked nervously, "Sir, what are your orders?" The admiral looked at the massive alien fleet slowly approaching. Then he gave one simple command. "Prepare the Sunbreaker." The bridge crew froze. The officer whispered, "Sir, that weapon has never been used in open battle." "I know, but this enemy deserves a reminder." On Relay Outpost 7, Tarek and Professor Malin watched the confrontation through long-range sensors. Tarek pointed at the map. "The enemy fleet is attacking." Human ships began firing first. Missiles streaked across space. Laser cannons flashed. Railguns launched heavy metal projectiles. Several Void Hunter ships exploded instantly. But the alien fleet did not stop. Their strange weapons fired dark energy beams that tore through space. A few human ships were hit. Explosions flashed like small stars. Tarek gasped. "They can damage human ships." Professor Malin nodded. "Yes, that is why humans fear them." Then suddenly the human fleet changed formation. Thousands of ships moved aside, clearing a path. In the center of the formation, one massive ship slowly moved forward. It was larger than anything Tarek had ever seen. The Titan's Reach. Admiral Hale stood calmly on the bridge. "Sunbreaker ready?" A weapons officer answered. "Fully charged, sir." The admiral gave the order. "Fire." For a moment nothing happened. Then the front of the giant carrier opened. A single beam of brilliant white energy shot forward. The beam did not explode. It did not scatter. It simply moved straight through space. And everything it touched vanished. One enemy ship disappeared. Then another. Then 10 more. The beam sliced through the entire Void Hunter formation like a blade. Within seconds, half of the alien fleet was gone. Not destroyed. Erased. Tarek stared in shock. "What was that?" Professor Malin whispered. "A weapon built specifically to kill them." The remaining Void Hunter ships tried to escape. But human destroyers moved quickly. Missiles and cannons finished the rest. Within minutes the entire enemy fleet was gone. The battlefield became silent again. On the bridge of Titan's Reach, the young officer spoke quietly. "Enemy fleet destroyed." Admiral Hale nodded slowly. But he did not look happy. The officer noticed. "Sir?" Hale looked at the empty space where the enemy ships had been. "That was only a scout force." The officer felt cold. "How can you be sure?" The admiral pointed at the signal still repeating on the screen. "Do not send this signal to Earth." Then he said quietly, "Because that signal, Was not a warning. The officer frowned. Then what was it? Admiral Hale answered with one terrifying sentence. It was a beacon. And somewhere far beyond the darkness, something much larger had already heard it. Rocket the battlefield was quiet again. Broken pieces of the Void Hunter ships floated through space like dark dust. Small fires burned on drifting metal and strange organic fragments. The human fleet slowly regrouped. Thousands of ships returned to formation around the giant carrier Titan's reach. But no one on the bridge celebrated. Admiral Marcus Hale stood near the main window, looking at the empty darkness ahead. The young officer beside him spoke carefully. Enemy scout fleet destroyed, sir. Hale nodded once. Yes, but his eyes stayed on the long-range sensor screen. The ancient signal was still repeating. Do not send this signal to Earth. The officer frowned. Sir, if that signal was not a warning. Hale finished the thought. Then it was something else. A beacon. The word felt heavy in the room. Another officer asked nervously. A beacon for what? The admiral finally turned around. For the rest of them. Silence filled the bridge. Far away on Relay Outpost 7, Tarek and Professor Malin were watching the same data. The human fleet had just destroyed 200 Void Hunter ships in a matter of minutes. It should have been a victory. But something about the situation felt wrong. Tarek rubbed his head. I thought the war was over. Professor Malin slowly shook his head. No, humans never believed that. Tarek looked at the repeating signal again. Then why did someone create that message? The professor studied the ancient code carefully. Maybe the warning was not meant for us. Then for who? Malin answered quietly. For the civilization that might discover the signal in the future. Tarek felt a chill. You mean someone millions of years ago tried to stop this? Yes. But they failed. The young officer stared at the star map. Human fleets were still gathering. More ships were arriving every hour. Something much bigger was coming. Inside the Galactic Council, fear was spreading across the chamber. The council leaders had watched the battle through long-range observation drones. They had seen the Void Hunter fleet, and they had seen the human response. One alien leader spoke with disbelief. 200 enemy ships destroyed in minutes. Another added quietly, those ships once destroyed entire civilizations. A third council member asked the most important question. If that was only a scout fleet, he looked around the chamber. How many more are out there? No one had an answer. Finally, the council leader gave an order. Contact Earth again. The communication officer nodded. The message was sent immediately. Within seconds, Earth Defense Command replied. A human officer appeared on the holographic screen. The council leader spoke quickly. We have witnessed the battle. The enemy fleet has been destroyed. The human officer nodded. Yes. Then the threat is gone? The human did not answer right away. Instead, he looked slightly to the side, as if checking another display. Then he said quietly, No. The council chamber became silent. The alien leader frowned. What do you mean? The human officer spoke calmly. The signal your station transmitted was a long-range beacon. For what? The human answered simply. For the main fleet. Several council members stood up at the same time. How large is this fleet? The human officer looked directly at them. We do not know. But we fought them once before. And during that war, he paused for a moment. They attacked with more than 50,000 ships. The council chamber exploded with panic. 50,000? That is impossible. No civilization could build such a fleet. The human officer's face remained calm. That civilization already did. And now they know where we are. Back near the battlefield, Admiral Hale's fleet was still scanning the darkness. One sensor officer suddenly spoke. Sir, we are detecting a signal response. Hale turned immediately. Location. Very far away, but closing. The main screen zoomed out. A tiny blinking dot appeared on the edge of the map. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the display was filled with hundreds of distant signals. The young officer's voice shook. That cannot be correct. Admiral Hale asked calmly. Range. Still several days away at current speed. Estimated fleet size? The computer finished analyzing the signals. Everyone on the bridge looked at the final number. The officer whispered, Over 40,000 ships. The bridge became completely silent. The admiral stared at the display for a long moment. Then he gave his next order. Transmit emergency broadcast. Yes, sir. The officer opened every communication channel across the galaxy. Moments later, the voice of Admiral Hale echoed across thousands of systems. Attention to all civilizations of the galaxy. This is Admiral Marcus Hale of Earth Defense Command. Several days ago, an ancient signal was activated. That signal belonged to a species known as the Void Hunters. They once attempted to destroy all intelligent life in this region of space. For thousands of years, humanity believed they were gone. But we were wrong. The message paused briefly. Across the galaxy, billions of beings listened in silence. Then Hale continued. Moments ago, our fleet encountered and destroyed a Void Hunter scout group. But our sensors have now detected the main enemy force. They are coming. Another pause followed. The estimated enemy fleet size is over 40,000 ships. Fear spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Hale's voice remained steady. All civilizations are advised to prepare defensive systems. Evacuate non-military populations. And if possible, he paused one last time. Send your fleets to join ours. On Relay Outpost 7, Tarek stared at the broadcast in shock. 40,000 ships. Professor Malin nodded slowly. Yes, that is a war for the entire galaxy. Tarek looked at the human fleet still gathering near the dark region of space. Do you think anyone will help them? Malin gave a quiet answer. After what we just saw, they might. The young officer looked at the massive formation of human ships. Even with thousands of warships, they looked small compared to the approaching enemy. Do you think humans can win again? The professor thought for a long moment. Then he said something surprising. Humans never planned to fight alone this time. Back on the Titan's reach, Admiral Hale watched the incoming enemy signals. The number continued increasing. 40,000, 45,000, 50,000. The officer beside him asked quietly, Sir, if the galaxy refuses to help, can we still stop them? Hale looked at the distant signals. Then he gave a small smile. They will help. How can you be sure? The Admiral pointed toward another screen. New signals were appearing. But these were different. Alien ships. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Fleets from other civilizations were moving toward the battlefield. The officer looked shocked. They're coming. Hale nodded. Yes. For the first time in history. The galaxy is standing together. Outside the giant window, human ships and alien fleets slowly formed a massive defensive line across the stars. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, ships of every design and size, all waiting in silence. And far in the distance, the darkness began to move. Thousands of black shapes slowly appeared. The Void Hunter Armada had arrived. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. And this time, humanity would not fight alone. Rocket,